Well, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday, Fixile Mbalula, the clown we love to hate, anyway, he did a press conference yesterday discussing the outcomes of the NEC meeting, which the ANC did. Now, there was an allegation which Fixile Mbalula made, and I thought we'd actually have a look at it. And this is on the back of a report that's been published on this very topic. But before I do, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. And if you'd like to support the work that I do here, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. So anyway, what did Fixile Mbalula say? Well, he fired back at the suggestion that the ANC had got cash from Iran. And he says that the CIA knows better. He says that the CIA, which is the best intelligence organization in the world, knows that there was no money taken from Iran. So he says he firmly denies the allegations of receiving financial support from Iran, and he rebuts the claims that have been circulated in political discourse by who he termed as clowns. So he talked about podcasts, mine or someone else's. Actually, I really don't know. But he does say that he dismisses the rumors, highlighting the party's compliance with the Political Party Funding Act, which he says imposes strict regulations on external funding sources. Now, according to Mbalula, he says the US CIA would be the best party to know whether the ANC received fundings. He said that the CIA knows basically everything. And he says that they have confidence that there were no such transactions that had taken place. So what is this report that's come out? Well, a report that's entitled Ties to Tehran, South Africa's Democracy and its Relationship with Iran, has been released, and in it highlights the following. So basically looks at South Africa's link to Iran and highlights that pre-1979 Iran under the Shah and apartheid South Africa were strategic allies who traded oil for arms and shared Cold War interests. Now, according to this report, post-1979, Iran cut ties with South Africa's apartheid and aligned with the ANC and SWAPO, but quietly continued to trade in arms and oil. Now, the reason for this was the emergence of the Iranian Revolution and the ANC-led government. So according to the report, the ANC shared anti-colonial rhetoric and solidarity between the revolutionary Iranian and ANC-led government. Now, as Iran transformed into a clerical dictatorship under the supreme leader, a number of mass purges, executions, and suppression of dissent was documented by the UN and categorized as crimes. Now, this created what they inevitably referred to as the Axis of Resistance, a network of terrorist proxy groups, which included Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, which targeted Israel and the West. Now, Iran publicly calls for the destruction of Israel and supports militant operations across the Middle East. All of this very important to understand. So South Africa professes that it abides by human rights and democracy as foreign policy pillars. Now, this was part of Mandela's 1993 doctrine. But in practice, it aligns with authoritarian anti-Western regimes such as Iran, Cuba, China, and Russia, out of ideological loyalty. Now, DIRCO, which is featured in the reports, has a policy which emphasizes Pan-Africanism and South-South solidarity, often at odds with the liberal democratic norms. Now, the report highlights that Iran was a major oil supplier post-1994, and trade with Iran grew after the UN sanctions were lifted in 2015. This meant that Iran's foreign direct investment in South Africa estimated at $135 billion in 2018, with major SA firms being involved, which included MTN and Sasol. Now, inevitably, there were trade challenges in dealing with Iran due to sanctions, geographic distance, and the South African bureaucracy. So what type of things have we seen occur with Iran? Well, there have been multiple defense MOUs signed in 2004 and 2017, which included Iranian naval visits to South African ports, with suspected tech exchange occurring between the two countries. Now, allegations that Iran sought nuclear or missile guidance technology from South Africa have been denied by Pretoria, but they've inevitably still been made. Now, South Africa defends Iran's right to nuclear energy in accordance with the NPT, but claims that no cooperation on weapons has occurred. We've also seen the MTN controversies. So MTN was accused of securing an Iranian license via bribery and influence over South Africa's IAEA vote and sanctions evasions in order to get a foothold in South Africa. This was tied to the Iranian military-industrial complex, and scandals remain unresolved in court to today. So has it actually occurred? Don't know. MTN is still very much a point of controversy. One SA diplomat was arrested for corruption, but MTN itself denies any wrongdoing. And it's important to understand that when it comes through to MTN, this all occurred while Cyril Ramaphosa was supposedly the chair of MTN. Now, as you'll know, South Africa often defends Iran at the UN and the IAEA, and has opposed sanctions and promoted dialogue over isolation with Iran. Now, you will recall that South Africa was grey-listed in 2023, and one of the reasons for that grey-listed was the citing of lax controls on terror funding, with Iran raised as a red flag. You'll also know that the ANC maintains formal ties with Hamas. They've had numerous high-level visits and MOUs signed between the two organizations. Now, South Africa refused to condemn Hamas after the 7th of October 2023 massacre and instead blamed Israel for it. So this is a bit like, stop hitting yourself, stop hitting yourself. Now, the ANC has aligned South Africa with Iranian-backed militant groups, and this has damaged its ties with Western democracies. We can see the outcome of that right now with the trade tariffs with the United States. Now, you'll know that South Africa filed genocide charges against Israel at the ICJ, and during that case, they echoed Iran and Hamas narratives. They admitted Hamas atrocities and drew praise from Iran and Hamas, which reinforced the perception that South Africa had aligned itself with Tehran's regional agenda. So what can we take from this report? Well, we can see that South Africa's relationship with Iran reveals a deep conflict between ideological loyalty and democratic principles. We live in a country that supposedly prides itself on democratic norms, on all the lovely little buzzwords that we would expect in a nice new liberal democracy, and yet amazingly we align ourselves with a terror-sponsoring theocracy, which really has undermined South Africa's global credibility. And this has meant that many individuals are now asking the key question, is South Africa on the wrong side of history? So now we get to the crux of the narrative. Did South Africa get paid by Iran to take Israel to the ICJ? We can see that they do have close alignments, and I've gone through all of the things that the report says. Now, the report does not explicitly state that Iran paid South Africa to take Israel to the International Court of Justice. However, the report does strongly imply political alignment and ideological coordination between South Africa and Iran, particularly in shared narratives of anti-colonialism and anti-imperialism. South Africa's refusal to condemn Iran-backed Hamas for October 7th, and South Africa's ICJ case against Israel, which echoed Iranian rhetoric and praised both Iran and Hamas. Now, South Africa's failure to mention Hamas's atrocities in the genocide case also drew the ire of Western nations who raised ideological questions. Now, the report does know that Hamas and Iran celebrated South Africa's filing, and Iran's foreign policy relies on proxies like Hamas and diplomatic allies like South Africa to attack Israel diplomatically and militarily. Now, South Africa's alignment with Iran is increasingly seen as being ideological and strategic. Now, why is strategic? I don't know, because if you look at the GDP exchange between the two countries, it's like non-existent. It's like it doesn't even feature on the radar. So the report does go on to conclude that there is no direct accusation of Iran paying South Africa to take Israel to the ICJ, but it clearly frames South Africa's actions as serving Iran regional goals, whether they be ideological sympathy, political coordination, or strategic alignment. So the question remains, did they get paid or did they just do it for free? Well, the report suggests that in terms of political alignment, they've done it with the goal of being strategically and politically aligned. So it does look like the report is suggesting that there was coordination between the ANC and Iran in order to take the ICJ case forward. But were they paid for it? Well, you see, that's a lot harder to prove because, as we know, even from the NTM controversy, where forms of monies did exchange through MTN, that whole thing, that whole debacle still remains unresolved to today. Because, let's be honest, the trail of money between countries is not that easy to find. That's one of the reasons, again, that South Africa was grey-listed, because we lack the controls to stop terror funding. So the allegation remains, did South Africa get paid? Well, the answer is, at this point in time, we don't know. It's possible that they did. It's possible they just did it for free. Seems very unlikely, but it does seem very plausible at this point in time, based on the report in question, that South Africa did coordinate with Iran at a minimum to take the case forward, whether they did it for free or they did it for cash. And if you're really just saying we're arguing over price, well, that's not really an argument at all, is it, Fixile? In any case, these are all just my opinions. Do let me know what you think of all this in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.